The club has its heroes, players who, because of the contribution they gave to the team, are deservedly accorded ultimate respect that gets passed down from generation to generation. That will certainly be the case for Billy Bremner.
Billy Bremner was a man who played football as though the next tackle might be his last.
Bremner. Way to go! He scored! Bremner's got it! And Billy Bremner has done it for Leeds.
His commitment to Leeds United, his readiness to fight for every inch of grass, and his unshakable leadership on the pitch made him the symbol of an era when football was played for keeps.
The team that was feared across Britain and the world, designed by Don Revie, led fearlessly by Billy Bremner. Billy's motto, in a plaque above his dressing room coat peg, was "Keep fighting." At only 5'5" and 10 stone, Bremner was living proof that football's a game where skill and tenacity can overcome an apparent lack of physical presence. His philosophy was simple.
In Bremner, football had more than just a leader. It had a talisman.
We play all the way for Leeds United. Ellen Road is the only place for us.
A player whose size deceived opponents and whose passion could ignite teammates, he forged an identity for Leeds that persists to this day.
I think team spirit is a big factor. The same way any team that gets success, they've got to have great team spirit, and we've got it here. It's been installed in us from when we were ground staff boys. We were all brought up together in the ground staff. I think this is a big factor here.
We weren't there to entertain, he once said. We were there to win, and you could judge whether you entertained people by how loud they were when you lifted the trophy. Bremner's story begins, as so many footballing legends do, in humble surroundings. Born on December the 9th, 1942, in the Scottish town of Stirling, he was raised in a working-class environment that sharpened his competitive instincts early on. Football was not a leisure activity in places like Stirling. It was a way of life, a reprieve from industrial hardship and economic struggle. Young Billy was constantly kicking a ball around the back streets, ignoring the fact that his physical stature was against him. "I've been small all my life," he said later, "but being small only matters if you let it." He didn't let it. From the moment he joined Leeds United in 1959 as a teenager, Bremner proved he had qualities that transcended physicality. Under the guidance of manager Don Revie, he developed into a midfielder who could dictate the tempo of a game. He didn't just cover ground, he dominated it.
We're out to toast each other on that silver.
Bremner combined tactical brilliance with an instinctive understanding of when to attack and when to defend. And he possessed a trait that all great leaders share, the ability to inspire by example. He could take control of a match just by how he tackled or passed the ball, Revie once observed. The team fed off him. At Leeds, Bremner was never just a cog in the machine, he was the engine.
Bremner. Oh, beautiful! What a superb goal by Bremner! Oh, what a wonderful goal by Bremner!
In the 1960s and 70s, Leeds United were a club transformed under Revie, emerging from obscurity to become one of the most successful and feared teams in English football. Bremner's role in that transformation was central. By 1966, he had established himself as captain, and Leeds had begun their run of sustained dominance.
He was known variously as the Wee Man, 10 stone of barbed wire, and simply King Billy. Captain of Leeds United, he epitomised the graft and dedication that made an ordinary English club side into one of the best teams Europe has ever seen.
They would win the First Division title in 1968-69 and again in 1973-74. They captured the FA Cup in 1972, the League Cup in 1968, and the Intercities Fairs Cup twice, in 1968 and 1971. Yet the bare facts of their success fail to capture the visceral way in which they achieved it. Leeds were a team that played with relentless physicality, and Bremner was their enforcer-in-chief.
Let's go to the skipper here, Billy Bremner. Third time lucky?
Yes, we're absolutely delighted. You know, we've worked hard.
But that's not to say his game was all grit and muscle. He was as capable of delivering a perfectly weighted pass as he was of delivering a bone-crunching challenge. The balance between artistry and aggression was what made him unique. Bremner understood that football is a game of moments, and he had the ability to influence those moments on both sides of the ball. "Billy could make you pay attention with a tackle or a goal," said Johnny Giles, his longtime midfield partner. That was his gift. He could change the mood of a game. Perhaps no single game exemplified Bremner's influence more than the 1972 FA Cup final, where Leeds faced Arsenal. It was a bruising encounter, as most games involving Leeds tended to be, but Bremner's composure under pressure stood out. Leeds lifted the trophy, and Bremner held it aloft with a grin that was part joy, part defiance. He had led his team to another triumph, and he had done it in the only way he knew how, by giving everything. Opponents often hated playing against Bremner, but they couldn't deny his impact. Former Liverpool manager Bob Paisley once admitted, "We couldn't stand him, but we'd have taken him in a heartbeat. He had everything you'd want in a player: toughness, skill, leadership." Paisley's sentiment was shared across English football.
As a captain, Billy led by example. I mean, his performance, I mean, he was a very consistent player. Can't remember him ever having a bad match, so he led by example.
Charismatic little guy, he was a great player, he always gave 100%.
He was the best, he was such an energetic, competitive player.
People that actually watch the game week in, week out, saw a magnificent athlete and a great footballer, you know, who would have got in any team.
He was a character in the dressing room, out of the dressing room, on the pitch, off the pitch. He was a brilliant fella to follow because he was a winner.
Even those who bore the brunt of his tackles had to concede that Bremner's approach was effective.
There was actually 17 Scots at Ellen Road, which is staggering when you hardly get any at some of the football clubs now. I mean, the English players were running around with Scottish accents at the time at Ellen Road.
He made life difficult for opponents not just by tackling them, but by unsettling them mentally. "He'd get under your skin," said Kevin Keegan, who famously clashed with Bremner during the 1974 Charity Shield match at Wembley. That day, tempers boiled over. An altercation between the two escalated into a full-blown fight, resulting in both players being sent off.
Keegan, who was sent off. Bremner is off as well. They're both throwing their shirts down.
The image of Bremner and Keegan squaring off remains iconic, a snapshot of an era when football was as much about intimidation as it was about skill. But for Bremner, it was never just about the fight itself. "You could win a battle without throwing a punch," he later reflected. "If you got them angry, you'd already won half the game." His ability to get inside an opponent's head was matched only by his ability to inspire his teammates. Leeds players recall how Bremner would rally the team before kickoff, sometimes with words, sometimes with a look. "He didn't need to give speeches," said Norman Hunter, Leeds' rugged defender. "He'd just look around the dressing room, and you knew what he expected." International football saw Bremner bring that same intensity to the Scotland team, where he earned 54 caps between 1965 and 1976. He played a crucial role in Scotland's qualification for the 1974 World Cup, a tournament in which they were eliminated in the group stage despite remaining unbeaten. It was a bittersweet campaign for Bremner, who felt that Scotland had the potential to go further. But even in disappointment, his leadership never wavered. He remained the same determined figure, the same relentless competitor. Controversy, however, was never far from Bremner's career. His fiery temperament, so central to his success, sometimes led him into trouble. In 1975, he was banned from international football after breaking team curfew before a crucial match. It was a setback that could have tarnished his legacy, but for those who understood Bremner, it was simply part of who he was. "Billy was never going to be the perfect professional," said Giles. "He was human, and his passion sometimes got the better of him. But that's what made him Billy." As the 1970s drew to a close, so too did Bremner's playing days. Leeds' golden era under Reevy had faded, and Bremner left the club in 1976 to join Hull City. He retired from playing in 1978, but football never left him. He transitioned into management, taking charge of Doncaster Rovers and later returning to Leeds United as manager in the mid-80s. His managerial career had moments of promise, but it lacked the sustained success he had enjoyed as a player.
I don't feel any bitterness. The chairman's made a decision, and I've got to respect and uphold that decision.
Still, those who played under him respected his uncompromising approach. "He didn't suffer fools," one former player recalled. "If you didn't give 100%, you wouldn't last." Bremner's death in December 1997, just 2 days shy of his 55th birthday, was a devastating blow to those who knew him. He had suffered a heart attack and the news sent shockwaves through the football community.
One of the greatest footballers of the past 30 years, Billy Bremner, has died after a suspected heart attack. He was 54.
At Elland Road, fans gathered to pay tribute to their former captain, leaving flowers, scarves and handwritten notes outside the stadium. The statue of Bremner that stands there today captures his essence perfectly. Arms raised, head held high, a man who knew exactly what he stood for.
At the end of a week when there wasn't much evidence at Leeds of old-fashioned loyalty, a statue was unveiled of a man who epitomised that very quality. So what did those who knew Billy Bremner think he would have made of the actions of Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank?
His legacy endures not just in the trophies he won, but in the way he played the game. For Bremner, football was a contest of wills, and he never backed down from a challenge. He was more than just a captain. He was the embodiment of a team that refused to be beaten, a leader whose influence extended beyond the pitch. To those who watched him play, he remains a reminder of a time when football was played with heart, sweat, and the unshakable belief that the game wasn't over until you made it so. As Reevy once said, there will never be another Billy Bremner. They don't make players like that anymore.